Good evening. I'm Cindy Fan, the Vice Provost for International Studies and Global Engagement. On behalf of the Regents of the University of California, I welcome you all to the 2018 Commencement Ceremony for the UCLA International Institute. I see that the students are already seated, so you can be seated too. We are here to recognize and celebrate the undergraduate and graduate degree recipients of International Institute academic programs. One of the most valued qualities of higher education is the critical role it plays in bridging nations and cultures. The academic programs in the International Institute aim at crossing borders and boundaries and building a global understanding from across the disciplines. These programs are designed to improve students' understanding of the world and produce global citizens, all of you, global citizens, as the next generation of world leaders. Today marks the end of a long chapter in the academic careers of these students, and we are here to congratulate all of them. Academic success is built upon the support of many people, including our world-class professors. And I would like to acknowledge the faculty members who are in attendance today. From your left side, we have Professor Jamima Pierre. Please stand. Professor William Marotti. Professor Mike Thies. Professor Mariam Farzanigan. And Professor Chris Erickson. But of course, the support from family and friends and from different cultures and backgrounds and traditions is indispensable. Yes, of course. Many of you have traveled long distances and made sacrifices to be here today. You are the emotional and moral and sometimes material support that has made possible the accomplishments of our graduates. So, on behalf of the students and my colleagues, thank you and welcome. The UCLA International Institute is honored to have as our keynote speaker Ann Kerr. Ann, yes. Ann has devoted her professional life to international education. She has worked at the International Institute since 1991, coordinating the visiting Fulbright Scholar Enrichment program for the Los Angeles Metropolitan Area. She also regularly teaches a FELIX course that introduces UCLA students to these visiting international scholars. And as a result, many of our students decided to study abroad. And as an undergraduate at Occidental College, Ann studied abroad in Lebanon at the American University of Beirut. Where she met her late husband, Malcolm Kerr, who would later become the president of American University until his tragic assassination in 1984. Ann, Malcolm, and their 4 children spent many years in the Middle East, principally in Lebanon and Egypt. And she has been a member of the Board of Trustees of the American University of Beirut for more than 3 decades. Recently, Ann and her children created the Kerr Family Fellowship at the UCLA Center for Near Eastern Studies. And this endowment underwrites the education of young Middle Easterners at UCLA, and the first recipient of the fellowship is going to enroll at UCLA this fall. Anne's experiences in the Middle East inspired her to author 2 books, more than my books. And they are Come With Me from Lebanon, An American Family Odyssey, and Painting the Middle East. And among her many accomplishments, she has raised an extraordinary family. As she sometimes says, I have 2 PhDs, 1 MBA, and 1 NBA. And you may be familiar with her middle son, Steve Kerr, who recently led the Golden State Warriors to their 3rd NBA championship. So, scholarship and athletics in one, just like UCLA. And study abroad and life experiences have led her and her family to actively promote intercultural education and understanding throughout her life. It's an absolute honor for us to have her speak today. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Ann Kerr.
Thank you all so much. It's really very, very exciting to be with you on this remarkable time in your lives and all your families with you. You're all set to begin new adventures, and I thought I'd just dip into mine a little bit, where they began almost 6 decades ago, when I left Occidental College and made a 17-day voyage on a Dutch freighter across the Atlantic to the far end of the Mediterranean to spend my junior year abroad, as Cindy has told you, at the American University of Beirut in Lebanon. Imagine that, yes. I can't believe there's so many of you here. It's wonderful. Imagine that phone calls home were prohibitively expensive. Airmail letters had to be as light as possible, written on thin onion paper, and would take a week or 2 to arrive. Today, I can't imagine how I did that, nor how my parents allowed me to do that. And I continually give them credit wherever they are. Seeds must have been planted at progressive Santa Monica High School, where I attended, and Occidental College, that made me curious about the non-Western world, and by my own parents, who moved from Nova Scotia, Canada, after their marriage to Santa Monica, California. Several Oxy students, I remember, my next-door house dorm mate and another had gone abroad for their junior years, so it wasn't really unheard of. And on the social side, after 2 years at Oxy, I had gone out with the interesting men who and one of whom had asked for his fraternity pin back. I don't know if you have pin. Do you still have pinning? Okay. But it was not being on the rebound that motivated me. No, it wasn't. I really wanted to explore the world. Our only port of call on that 17-day journey was Casablanca, where I first heard the Muslim call to prayer. That haunting sound was the beginning of my attraction to the Middle East, which has remained with me to this day. I continue to go back at every possible opportunity. My junior year abroad changed my life in ways that I never could have imagined. Along with meeting my future husband and Middle East scholar Malcolm Kerr, I lived with 4 Arab women who have remained lifelong friends, 2 Palestinians, 1 Lebanese, and an Iraqi. Each was from a different religious group: Greek Orthodox Christian, Baha'i, Assyrian Christian, and Shiite Muslim. A typical composite in those days of Middle Eastern religions. It had little to do with how AUB students related to each other. We weren't aware as much as people are these days of religious identities. Headscarves or hijabs were something that their grandmothers might have worn, but we didn't see them in those days. And that's something that, again, has been part of the evolution of society in those parts of the world. I returned to Oxy for my senior year, as was expected of us, to bring back what we had learned from our experiences abroad, with an engagement ring on my finger, on my wedding finger. And when I wasn't running to the mailbox to look for letters from Malcolm, I attended the courses remaining in my education major and participated in international activities on campus. That year, Oxy represented Lebanon at the Model UN, and I was to head the delegation. We all piled into a bus to head up Northern California for the meetings, and my mother was on board as the chaperone. It gave me great pleasure to know that she was seeing that indeed this allowing her daughter to go off to such a far part of the world had brought some worth to it all. Another very important point of that first year back at Oxy was the realization that among the benefits of my overseas experience was a deeper understanding of my own country and culture and appreciation of the United States. It was a kind of reflexive learning that happens when studying a foreign language helps you to better understand your own language. And that's what I have tried to bring to my Fiat Lux students through the courses I've taught, and encourage people to go abroad. Well, the recipe for a young college woman's life in those days worked for me. We became engaged in our junior year, and we married after graduation, and we taught school for 2 years while our husbands went to graduate school, and that was called we got our PhD, putting hubby through. That would not be apropos these days, right? And then start a family. Our family life started when we went back to Beirut for my husband's first job, and his first teaching job, and our first 2 children were born. We both felt such an attraction to that part of the world where we had met and where Malcolm's parents had taught for 40 years. Then came a postdoc for Malcolm at Oxford and a freezing winter taking care of children in a country cottage with very little heat. After that, we spent 20 years at UCLA, where Malcolm taught in the political science department with frequent leaves of absence and sabbaticals to return to the Arab world where we both loved to be. As if it were a completely normal way of rearing children, we bundled our 4 into a Volkswagen bus on different sojourns from Europe across the Bosphorus to Beirut, from Cairo through Libya to Tunisia, and from Spain to Morocco and Algeria. My children look back on those days with delight, unaware or forgetting the challenging moments they caused their parents. Days of driving cooped up in a Volkswagen was not always fun, nor was coaxing one of my sons to study harder when he wanted to be back in California playing on his high school basketball team. It took a lot of enforcement from his parents and elbow grease from Steve to wash all of his, I don't know if I should use the word, Cairo sucks graffiti off the wall above his bed. No quotations, please. A dream was realized when my husband was chosen to be the president of the American University of Beirut. The civil war that had been raging in Lebanon for 17 years looked as if it might be winding down, or at least we wanted to think so. We could go back and help rebuild the AUB. But that dream was short-lived. Malcolm was assassinated outside his office 17 months later. A well-known story by now, I think. After Beirut, I returned to Egypt, where we had been on sabbatical, and where I resumed my former teaching job there in the English department. And we had a circle of friends who would understand why we had gone to AUB. We stayed in Cairo for 5 years while my youngest son finished high school, and my oldest son did his PhD on a Fulbright grant. That was our first family experience with Fulbright, but soon to be followed by my own when I returned to our California home and to UCLA to become the coordinator of the Fulbright Visiting Scholar Program in Southern California. I was learning so much from working with scholars from around the world and wondering how I could find a way to spread these insights to others when the September 11th attacks occurred in 2001. In response, very wisely, UCLA began the Fiat Lux program to bring new courses into the curriculum for students living in a post-September 11th world. This gave me the opportunity I was looking for. Some of you in the audience might have taken the seminar I developed to bring the Fulbright scholars' voices to you, perceptions of the U.S. abroad, discussions with visiting Fulbright scholars. And more recently, in response to the misnamed Arab Spring, I began a fall seminar, U.S. Values versus U.S. Interests in Greater Middle East Diplomacy. That's a very challenging and course title and a huge umbrella for each week the changing events in the Middle East. I'm grateful to UCLA, the Fulbright program, and the International Institute for supporting me in these efforts, which have allowed me to carry on the mission of international bridge building. And I wish you graduates the same opportunities to utilize your training here at UCLA to carry on your dreams. And please come back and tell us what you're doing. It's so gratifying to receive emails from you and hear your latest adventures. So I wish you all the very best, and congratulations.